Coming up, busy day around the SEC. Some illuminating comments from Nick Saban about his quarterback situation. Auburn has added a player, and you know what? Georgia's added one too. We'll tell you all about it next, right here on SEC Country Live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. We're glad you're with us. Busy hour here coming up. A lot of it involves your comments. Players coming into the SEC. Maybe an example of a player on his way out of the SEC, at least based on what Nick Saban has to say. We'll kind of cover it all here.
I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong, but the grad transfer market is at its peak right now, right?
Yeah,
I mean, this is the most important it's ever been. I don't ever remember hardly, maybe like one grad transfer back when I was in school.
Yeah, exactly. It's certainly become hot here the last couple of years, and in the SEC, we've seen examples of grad transfers making a difference. We'll talk about some of those coming up here in just a moment. Let me start the show, though, with item number one on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list about a player that might also eventually be a grad transfer at some point in time based on the thought process here. But I think the one thing for me is becoming obvious, at least seemingly obvious, that it looks like Jalen Hurts' days at Alabama are numbered. Let me tell you why I feel that way, and you can tell me if you agree. So Nick Saban goes on, what's the show called on ESPN in the morning? Is it Get Up? Is that what it's called?
Get Up, that's it.
Get Up. He's on Get Up in the morning. It's with Jalen Rose and the gal with the blonde hair. And you've seen the show. You know what it is. So he goes on the show, and the subject of Jalen Hurts comes up, his quarterback. And here is what Cole Kubelik tweets out as a quote from Saban. I'm going to assume from Cole. This is an accurate quote. He's obviously a sharp guy. But Cole quotes Saban from the show as having said, "I don't know that I'm in a position to make that decision about whether or not Jalen Hurts is going to be on the roster this fall." So he's asked, hey, is Jalen Hurts going to be here this fall? And Saban essentially punts on the issue saying, that's not my decision to make. Now here's what I believe I think I know. If there was a chance that Hurts was going to transfer, Saban would pretend like there was no chance whatsoever. Why wouldn't he be on this team? You know, he made a commitment to Alabama. I expect him to fulfill that commitment to Alabama. He would essentially act like transferring is not an option. The fact that he's even mentioning that as a possibility means that he's had these private conversations. He knows the way things are going to go. Maybe he no longer cares because of how Mac Jones played on Saturday. But for me, I'm going to take this as Nick Saban just moved Jalen Hurts out the door.
I don't feel as directly as you do, but I'm sliding towards your way of thinking on this. And there's a couple of reasons why. First of all, I think that Nick Saban knows that now Jalen's dad has a direct line to the media, right? This guy's willing to talk. So I think Nick Saban's very careful. I'm not going to go out of my way to say something for a fact when I know that this guy could just come out and say something 2 days later. Somebody could ask him to respond, and he'd be like, no, that's absolutely not the case. That's not what we told Nick Saban. We told Nick Saban he wanted to be QB1. But I do agree with you to a point about the Mac Jones situation where I feel like Nick Saban is kind of sliding past the point where he's like, well, we have no idea. Yeah. You know, this is something where both these guys are going to be on the roster. They're both going to be great players for Alabama. He's sliding past that point to now where it's like he's almost hands off at this point, right?
Yeah.
He just got done with spring. He wasn't that impressed with Jalen in the spring game. They're moving into summer football. You know, Tua is becoming more and more healthy by the day. And I think Nick Saban's just saying, look, I'm not going to state anything for a fact right now. I'm not going to say that Jalen Hurts is going to be our starting quarterback next year when really a guy that's been the starting quarterback for 2 years, that's probably something you should come out and say. Nick Saban's not willing to do that. It's a hands-off attitude that I think is different from most of the things we've seen from Nick Saban so far.
Peggy Mitchell-Slow brings up an interesting point in our Facebook comment section saying that maybe he needs to get his degree. Kind of talking about some of those choices that Jalen Hurts is going to face here. I actually want to deal with that part of this in just a moment, but let me go back to what you said here in terms of the way you just described it, and I thought that was pretty interesting. There is a way in which a win sometimes turns into a loss. You know, Saban could spin some sort of yarn that makes Hurts want to give it a shot this fall. I mean, I've been on this show a million times suggesting that Hurts would be described as the QB leader in the summer, that he'd get the first snap in the first game against Louisville. And so you've sort of, I hate to say it this way, but this is what it would be, you've tricked him into sticking around for another year. If you do that, you get one more year of Jalen Hurts, but you potentially lose a huge PR battle if Hurts' dad starts talking again, or if it becomes this sort of general feeling among the next generation of dual-threat quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts that you didn't do right by the Jalen Hurts that you had.
Yeah.
So Saban, I think if he's doing this, it's probably somewhat wise strategic thinking here to say, you know, maybe it's best to – I loved how you said this. I hope I said it the way you did. go hands off, let Hurts decide for himself, make it appear that Alabama is treating him very fairly, not holding this quarterback prospect hostage here. Let him decide what's best for him.
Yeah, let me be very clear. I mean, we don't know that Jalen's dad would come out and say anything. We don't know how Jalen feels. This is not like we're talking to this guy as a number one. But I don't know that Nick Saban knows what Jalen's dad is going to say at this point. I don't know that Nick Saban really – the last thing Nick wants, I know this for a fact because he used to preach this to us all the time, the last thing Nick wants is a distraction. I mean, that's the absolute last thing you want for a team that should be dialed in with a ton of talent offensively and defensively, dialed into making another run, dialed into one of those classic Alabama Nick Saban seasons. The last thing he wants throughout the summer and throughout the fall is some type of distraction of somebody saying, oh, told you so, or Nick, you tried to tell us something was fact that it's not. And so I think he is taking that approach of saying, listen, you guys can decide how this thing's going to turn.
To go back to what the Facebook commenter said a moment ago about options for Jalen Hurts, you know who John Hayes is? He's the producer for the Paul Feinbaum Show. He had a tweet earlier today, and we don't have this tweet to show you. Sometimes we show these on the screen. I don't have this one to show for you. But he had a really good tweet where he described what might be the likely options for Jalen Hurts. He says he could stay at Alabama for 2 more years. He could be at Alabama in 2018, then transfer as a graduate and play somewhere else in 2019, and essentially, play 1 year as a graduate transfer. Or he could not play football at all anywhere in 2018, go to school, graduate, then transfer with 2 years of eligibility for, I guess, what would be 2019 and 2020. And it's really that third option we don't think about here of, what if he just doesn't play football in 2018? He's a student at Alabama, he gets his degree, he moves on, and then he moves on to a place where he's got 2 years of eligibility. And I think that John here does a pretty good job of laying out what the options are of staying at Bama, transfer as a 1 year graduate option after having stuck around the Alabama system, which is maybe worth considering here a bit too, or getting that degree without playing football and have the 2 years of eligibility.
Yeah, I think the reason that I've never actually approached that as a topic or as a possible path for Jalen Hurts is just because he needs too much work, right? I mean, that's what it is for me. The reason you don't sit out a year is because he needs work. He needs to be involved in a system. He needs to be running an offense. If his goal is to get to the NFL in the end or win a championship at a different school, he needs to work on that. And so for a guy like Jalen Hurts that already is probably unpolished as a passer there at Alabama, for him to take a season off, I don't think he comes back any better.
So I'm going to tell you that Jalen Hurts never takes a snap as an NFL quarterback. That's what I believe. I don't think it'll ever happen. So do you think there's a chance, let's just say I'm right here, that Hurts is not an NFL quarterback. Do you think he's wise enough then to say, if I'm not going to be an NFL quarterback, how about I go to a place at a college that perfectly suits my skill set and I can get 2 years to build one of the great legacies of running quarterbacks that we've seen? And there was not a time not too long ago where there was tremendous legacies of great running quarterbacks all over the landscape of college football. We don't have quite as much of that anymore because of the proliferation of the spread, but it used to be that running quarterbacks, won Heisman trophies and built, statues for themselves there. Is there a chance he's wise enough to sort of think about that as his option of maybe I can just be one of the all-time great running college quarterbacks?
I think all of his options are on the table, right? I mean, I don't think that Jalen Hurts has thought much past being the Alabama starting quarterback. I don't think that he's really ventured that far. Now, I think his dad has. I think everybody else has. I think everybody at other schools, possibly looking at a quarterback have thought, I mean, I'm sure there's people that are Georgia Tech fans that think, boy, we'd love to have Jalen on our team. Boy, he'd come over here and run the triple option. He'd be a dynamic threat at the quarterback position. So I think everything's on the table. I just think if his dad's words are true and he is a quarterback, then I don't see what you get sitting out of here. Now, if he wants to change positions and he wants to learn how to be a slot receiver and that dynamic open field ability, also learn how to catch the ball, then maybe you think about skipping a year. Maybe you can just run 7-on-7 tournaments and do things like that on your way back to playing football.
Let me fly through a lot of these comments. Ellen Thomas Balthrop on Facebook says Saban's not one to show all his cards. That may be true, but I also think that everything that Saban says, even with questions he wasn't necessarily expecting, in this case it's probably a question he was expecting, generally I think of Saban as someone who gives you a calculated answer here. I don't think Saban would answer on Jalen Hurts without thinking about his answer. So this is Saban showing you a card. It's a card of, hey, this decision belongs to Jalen here. He's opened up the possibility of a transfer, which for me is meaningful.
Right, and I think there's so much more depth to this. That's why he's so calculated. I can't remember who brought it up in the YouTube section a minute ago. It might have been Cliff that brought this up. There's almost a lot on the line of how long are you going to lead this quarterback on, right? If you know he's not going to be your guy next year and you want him to take the first snap, Nick Saban all of a sudden is on ESPN in the morning, really in the crosshairs. you don't want to really go out on that limb and say you know something when you don't, because it's going to make him look bad in the end. I don't think that Nick Saban feels like at this point Jalen Hurts is worth that.
Drew Stanley says it makes all the sense in the world for him to go to Texas A&M. From a geographic standpoint, that's obviously closer to his hometown, but Jalen Hurts does not feel like a Jimbo Fisher quarterback for me.
No, I don't think he does either. I think Jimbo Fisher more and more, as he sits at Texas A&M, will ask his quarterbacks to do more and more pro-style type of things. I don't know that Jalen fits down there right away.
Our buddy Brandon Walker says it's time for Saban and Bama to rip the Band-Aid off. It's the best for the future of the program for Hurts to go ahead and transfer so they can go ahead and concentrate on Tua in the future. So I slightly disagree with Brandon on that. Obviously, Tua, I believe, is the future of Alabama football. But Alabama gets worse if Jalen Hurts is not your backup quarterback.
Yeah.
You want to have that quarterback that you truly trust. Listen, I'm not going to throw my guy overboard just because I saw Mac Jones play fairly well in a spring game. Bama's worse if your number 2 quarterback's not Jalen Hurts.
Right. If Gardner Minshew was on campus at Alabama right now, this would be a lot
different.
easier. I mean, this is just something that you have to look at the quarterback position. If you're just willing to let Jalen Hurts walk out the door without a fight, and you're down to 2 scholarship quarterbacks, and it's not like this is a rebuilding program. This is a program that is in a great position to make another run at the postseason and try to get back to an SEC championship. And so I think that's what weighs heavily on Nick Saban to say, what's best for Jalen, what's best for me, what's best for this team as a whole.
Michael Cooper says, OMG, BA, we need a whole chart to deal with this kid. My head hurts and I'm feeling sorry for him. It's April, Well, this goes back to what his dad said last week. I'll dispute the idea of Jalen Hurts being the biggest free agent in college football history, but when a guy who put together the kind of record at Alabama Hurts has put together, when he's considering leaving, that's going to be met with sizable attention.
Not only that, but a true freshman quarterback at Alabama.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something you don't see in a guy who's been to back-to-back playoff appearances and has played, in a lot of meaningful games at Alabama. This is not something you just throw away. It's going to be a topic to continue to come about.
Christopher P. Smith says, guys, do SEC schools allow undergrads to transfer to other SEC schools? I don't know if it's prohibited by league rules or just sort of prohibited by the individual institutions, but it does not happen where you transfer as an undergraduate from one school to the other. But it has famously happened as a graduate transfer. I guess maybe most recently was Mo Smith leaving Alabama and going to Georgia as a graduate transfer. So we've seen transfers within the conference from a grad transfer standpoint, which opened the door for Jalen Hurts to potentially go just about anywhere, but we haven't really seen that as an undergraduate situation.
Yeah, and if Nick Saban or Jalen Hurts chooses to go down that road, then I think you're walking into another PR nightmare for Nick Saban of possibly saying, because this all came up in the Mo Smith situation. Where do you want him to go? Where do you not want him to go? Nick Saban went hands off and said, listen, this is an SEC issue now. Like, I've already given him my blessing. I've already moved on from that. So
well, he didn't exactly give it his blessing.
Yeah, he didn't initially.
I don't want to relitigate that story again.
Definitely didn't initially give him the blessing, but I think I think you would have to wade back into those waters.
Now, if Hurts wanted to go, let's say he left Alabama this year, he'd go to junior college for a year and then come back for one more year to an SEC school. There's nothing preventing that. Nick Marshall ends up at Auburn. A lot of guys sort of bounce around that way, but you don't see a guy sit out a year and go from one SEC school to the other.
Yeah, it's just tough. I mean, if you're Jalen Hurts, then all of a sudden you're chancing going to JUCO and you're not surrounded by as much talent as you were at Alabama. You're not going to have the same style of system. You're not going to have the offensive line. You're not going to have the wide receivers. And then so where do you land after that? And so I think there's so many different dynamics to come into play here, and Jalen hasn't said that he wants to transfer yet. And so I think you put everything, and the talking heads just like us can come up with all these different resolutions, but until it actually comes to fruition, who knows what's going to happen.
Let me get one more comment on Facebook, and then we'll change the subject here. Rick Keene says, you know what I don't understand? How is it that we've seen one good half from Tua, and now he's the best option? What is Bama going to do if Tua ends up being a bust or has a bad day in a crucial game? Let's face it, all SEC games are crucial. I think that's a fair point raised by Rick Keene. I think what you're going to tell me is, and what I believe to be true myself, is Alabama knew last year already that Tua was better than Jalen Hurts. There just wasn't a good reason or an imperative to make that move. You can't watch two guys practice side by side and not get a sense for who's better than the other. So we may have found out in the second half of the national championship game that Tua Tagovailoa is better than Jalen Hurts. The truth is, I was saying that this time a year ago, but I think everybody behind closed doors at Alabama already knew that to be true.
I mean, I went to the fall scrimmage, preseason fall scrimmage, and I'm not actually technically, one of the rules they have for former players, you're not allowed to talk about what you see. So I never brought it up on the show, but it wasn't a secret. I mean, all the whispers in the stands were, look at that kid, look at Tua, look at the way he's throwing the ball, look at 13, look at that left-handed guy. There was no secret, and it's not like this was just one game where Jalen struggled. We're talking about a season worth of games where we really built in that direction. He couldn't win the Auburn game, struggled at times against Clemson, and struggled in the first half against Georgia. So it wasn't just boy, this guy missed a few throws and they put the backup in and everybody's crowning him. That's just not the case.
All right, let's move on here. Item number 2 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list, some additions to the SEC. Just discussed possible departure for Hurts. How about both Auburn and Georgia adding a player today? Let me start with Auburn here, who picked up an offensive lineman, Jack Driscoll. Driscoll made this on official on Twitter earlier, saying he wants to thank UMass for the last 3 years. Made lifelong friends and memories that'll last forever. I'm grateful for the opportunity they gave me, both academically and athletically. However, at this time, I've decided to pursue an MBA, play football at Auburn. War Eagle. Driscoll chose Auburn over both UCLA and USC. I guess 24/7 and Rivals had some reporting on this last week. His visit to Auburn initially was a bit of a surprise. No one really reported on it at all until it was after it was done. And I'm going to be a broken record on stuff like this. These kind of additions, when we were talking about Calvin Anderson-Rice way back at the beginning of the winter, that was a big deal for me. I'm going to treat Driscoll the same way. I could not pick this kid out of a lineup. If he was in the room right now, I wouldn't know who he was. But this is a guy who has experience playing, not major college football, because that's not what we think of UMass as being, but it is college football. He's essentially a grown man here. I'm not telling you he's going to come to Auburn and win some sort of national award, but giving Auburn more offensive line depth than it had, this accomplishes that.
I think it's big time. And honestly, I went back and watched some of this guy's film when they actually played Tennessee last year. He's the starting right tackle for UMass. Reminds me a lot of myself. I mean, he's a little bit undersized, probably not as strong as he's going to be. But this guy has 2 years left of college. This isn't a grad transfer coming in for his senior year. This guy was a redshirt sophomore last year. He's going to come in and play 2 years for Auburn. So, I don't know if he's ready to step right into some of those situations that Auburn has on their offensive line. I don't know that you want him to if you're an Auburn fan. I think you have guys in place that you want to feel really good about. But adding to that depth, I mean, he looks like a guy who has quick enough feet. I don't know if the upper body strength quite there yet. He's a little bit of a lean in his face, kind of gets his face in too much. But this is a guy who, depth-wise, you talk about, J.B. Grimes being one of those guys that can really build guys up technically. This guy could fit as a nice piece and a swing tackle for the next couple of years.
In a weird way, I generally like 1-year grad transfer players more so than 2-year players because the last thing you want is him to come here and not be able to get acclimated to SEC life, and now you've got a scholarship for 2019 that's essentially being unused by a competing player. But if you're an Auburn guy, you hope that's not the case here. And I think you look at the competition here. If it's a UCLA, if it's a USC, I mean, when you have other major schools sort of going after you, that gives you a sense of kind of where he fits into the picture here because, I mean, you said this before off the top of the show. I talked about this a lot last year. I feel like in general, the transfer market is sort of undercovered. We make a big deal about high school football recruiting, and Lord knows I do a lot of that. But it's these transfer guys who oftentimes make immediate impact. Whether you want to talk about, Fihoko and Giles at LSU, or the kid from Oregon State that played receiver at Alabama a couple years ago. Georgia's had a lot of these guys. Some of these guys that sort of step in and make a contribution, you're better with them than without them.
Yeah, you definitely are. And these guys come in and. Listen, you didn't have to put them on the field at your school, right? But they learned it somewhere else where to play football at a high level and going up against some of this upper echelon talent. And while this kid did go to UMass, think back to yourself whether or not your school played at UMass the last couple of years. I mean, a lot of SEC schools have played UMass, and this guy has had a lot of talent come his way in the last couple of years and has seemingly held his own.
We've got some comments coming in on Driscoll here for a moment. Brock Weaver says he graded out at an 85.1. Also, he's in the top 5 of Group of 5, 6'5", 294 pounds. I mean, so those numbers obviously speak for itself. Riley Miles also mentioning the same thing. They graded out as a top 5 tackle in the Group of 5, a year ago. And that size matters to me. A guy that has pretty good, effort on film here. Getting his blocks down. I mean, listen, I think Auburn celebrates this as good news. You don't have to know who the player is, and before this week, I don't know that anybody watching the show had ever heard of Jack Driscoll, to be honest. You don't have to know who the player is to need the player. In this case, Auburn got a player that it needed, even if we didn't even know who he was until a few minutes ago.
I'm not, you guys know me. I'm not high on those grades coming from some of those, third-tier websites that are going to grade guys that don't really know situations. But he did have a higher grade than Calvin Anderson did. I think Calvin Anderson is a much better pass protector. This is the Rice grad transfer that didn't end up going to Auburn, ended up going to Texas. But I think in terms of run blocking and the ceiling that you have having this guy for 2 years instead of 1 with Calvin Anderson, I think you're pretty excited about what you're getting. Like I said, I think Auburn's been in the market for a grad transfer tackle for a reason because they need that depth up there at front. And I don't know if they feel extremely comfortable with what's at right tackle. So throw this guy in the mix and see what he's got.
We'll talk about Georgia here in a moment. But one thing you got to be careful of when it comes to the guy coming down from UMass, and we've seen this in the SEC a few times now, it ain't hot in Massachusetts the way it is down in
No.
Auburn, Alabama.
No.
So that's going to be a big transition. You
Yeah.
know, in Massachusetts, 75 degrees, about as hot as it gets sometimes in the summer. It'll be 75 indoors at Auburn.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not even being funny. You've got to be careful about that transition.
There's no doubt about it. And I played around people like this my entire career, right? From Alabama, we would go recruit somebody from California or Utah or Arizona. And listen, they'd show up at Alabama and they would wheeze. And it was the same thing when I played for the Falcons.
What?
They would wheeze. You know, like, how do you guys breathe down here? Like, I can't, I'm not used to this air. It's almost like going to, you know, if I went to play sports up in the Rocky Mountains,
Yeah.
like, you can't
Be a very
breathe
different
quite like
thing.
it is. So it is a lot different. It's going to take them a month or two to get accustomed to that.
By the way, we'll get more of your YouTube comments coming up here as well. Let me talk about Georgia here for a moment. They'd also added a graduate transfer today. This young man from Notre Dame, his name is Jay Hayes. He was an Oklahoma commit, but now Jay on Twitter says, this is it. In a month, I'll be heading down to Athens to play for the Georgia Bulldogs. Go Dogs. Jay did visit Georgia for G-Day on Saturday, and this is a position that Kirby Smart has made no bones about. He does not think the Dogs are deep enough along the defensive line. A guy that came from Notre Dame, are you kidding me? An experienced college player, you know, getting the, you know, the legit, you know, like program like Notre Dame. Oklahoma wanted him. Georgia got him. Hard to view this as anything but a monster pickup for the Dogs.
I think it's a big deal. I don't know that I sit it up there with like a Braden Fajoko style of transfer. I don't know that he makes that big an impact. When you talk about the depth and you talk about a guy who, if I'm not mistaken, I read earlier, might have had 7 tackles against Georgia when they came up there this year. I mean, this is a guy who made an impact against the running game from several other teams. I think that's exactly what Kirby Smart's looking for. Somebody who can get inside and clog things up in the middle. First down, second down. Maybe third down, you get him off the field. But for those first 2 downs, I think Kirby Smart's found a nice piece.
Dan Riggins on YouTube. Let me read this comment from Dan on YouTube, who says, transfers are a good thing, but they usually expose the team's deficiency. I don't deny that. In the case of Georgia, obviously, I'm pretty well aware of their deficiencies, and defensive line was one. You talk about that run-stopping guy.
Yeah.
Right now, the only guy at Georgia that truly, I think, fully fills that idea the way that you want that run-stopping defensive tackle to be is a guy like DeQuan Hawkins-Muckle, who's been in the program for a while. Tyler Clark's a really good defensive lineman. A little bit different, though, in terms of that overall profile. I'll say the same thing about Julian Rochester. But to have that real beefy run stopper here, I mean, Kirby Smart talked all spring about Georgia not having that, and for Georgia offensive line, that's pretty good right now. Once again, that group was pushing that Georgia defensive line around a lot during the spring.
Yeah, and I think it's important to look at here from what you can get, because you can't recruit freshmen that are just ready to step in.
No, you can't. Not a defensive line.
Freshmen are not ready to step up as run cloggers in the middle of the defensive line. So if all of a sudden Kirby looks around and says, boy, we just didn't get enough of those guys, to be able to go out and reach out to a place like Notre Dame, I'm with you. I mean, that's a huge haul for
I mean, listen, I like to look at the all-SEC teams every year, and I like to look at the position groups where you can be a freshman and make it.
Yep.
Really, there's almost no position now where you can't be a freshman, all-conference guy. The defensive line is one of those last sort of lag-behind positions, whereas an 18-year-old kid, it's sort of hard to come in and earn all-conference honors. It's just a tough position to play early.
Yeah, it really is, and it's almost tougher, in a way, it's almost easier to play like center on the offensive line, really, than it is to play that clog guy in the middle of the defensive line, because 18-year-olds just don't have that strength. And for a guy that I'm assuming is probably 20 or 21 coming down from Notre Dame, you've built it up in the weight room. You are officially a grown man by the time you get to that age in college football, and so you have that next level of strength in your hips.
Speaking of Georgia, let's do item number 3 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list, and y'all are going to love this. Some of y'all that don't like me or don't like Georgia, you're going to have so much fun with Trent Dilfer here on this. I'm going to try my best to explain why Dilfer's wrong. Trent goes on, and for those of you not aware, Dilfer was former NFL quarterback, won a Super Bowl with the Baltimore Ravens back in the year 2000. They beat our buddy Michael, our producer's New York Giants. He wins the Super Bowl there. Not ever a great quarterback at the NFL level, but a guy that's sort of gone on to be an analyst on TV. He's a personal coach with the quarterbacks, leads the Elite 11 quarterback camp, and he's on the Saturday Down South podcast. And on that podcast, he's talking about Justin Fields, a quarterback that he knows from the Elite 11, Jake Fromm, a quarterback that he knows from the Elite 11. He predicts controversy in Athens with Fields and Fromm. Here is what Trent Dilfer says about Justin Fields. He's a very, very special prospect. I like the SEC. I like Georgia. I don't really like to take sides. I was bummed to see him go to Georgia because naturally there's going to be this controversy now, which is unfortunate because you have 2 really special quarterbacks on the roster, and the reality of it is that one of them won't be there long term. What's up with Trent Dilfer saying that he was rooting for Justin Fields not go to Georgia, and that there's a controversy that's just sort of destined to happen? How about Trent Dilfer butt out and mind his own business?
You don't like
Mind your own business, Trent Dilfer.
You don't like that coming from Trent Dilfer. I think those are interesting words for sure, but he really echoes a lot of what I've been saying for the last couple of days, or last couple of weeks about how this, I agree with him. I think it's coming to a head. I don't think it's this year. I definitely don't think it's this year. I think at some point in the next 3 years, I think Dilfer looks at it and says, these guys are just too good to keep one of them off the field for the entire game. And at some point, controversy, I don't know if that's the right word, but at some point it could lean that way.
But hold on. I mean, talking about something 3 years from now is not even worth doing in the SEC anymore, because look how fast things change. I mean, Jalen Hurts was the toast of the town in October of 2016, November of 2016. And, now we're talking about him not even being in Alabama anymore. So no one's prediction about what's going to happen 36 months from now means anything to me.
I agree.
I mean, listen, Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, they could be coaching somewhere different or not coaching at all. One of these coaches that's at one SEC school could be at another school. This is a very fast-paced, change-oriented league. So your prediction about 3 years from now, it means nothing to me. Whether it be you, a friend, Trent Dilfer, some moron on the internet, I don't care about anybody's prediction 3 years from now. But for the immediate future, I saw Dante Edie's comment a moment ago saying, Trent Dilfer's right. This is destined to be a disaster, or whatever it was he said. That's just wishful thinking on the part of UGA haters.
I don't think it's destined to be a disaster at all for UGA. I think it is the opposite of a disaster for UGA. I think this is great for UGA. I just think at some point it's going to be bad for one of the two quarterbacks. I think that's just the way it rolls. And listen, I agree with you. Hurts was the toast of the town a year ago, but we were also talking on the show a year ago about.
No, I said 2016. He was toast of the town. By 2017, he's already starting to change.
Yeah, I was going to say. So, we can look a year ahead. We can look to next offseason. We can look at the fact that there's just not many examples of two quarterbacks sticking around this long around each other. And while I don't think it has a lot to do with this season, I think it has a little bit to do with this season, because I think that Justin Fields, if he forces his way on the field at some point in the fall as a backup quarterback, that has a lot to do with the next 3 seasons.
All right, let me get a lot of these comments. Antonio Triplett says, the truth hurts, B.A. Trey Dukes, who's a Georgia fan, even says, it's just facts, B.A. Robert Bird asks, how can they both shine at the same time frame? Yilye Ursal, who's also a Georgia fan, says, and I'm sure I butchered his name, but he's always a great commenter. He says, B.A., you're going to have to face the facts on this, because Fields and Fromm are both alphas. That may be true, but here's my point on this. And you can tell me if I'm wrong, and that's why we're having the conversation, so people can tell me I'm wrong about this. The only scenario in which this turns into something negative is one of two things happen. Either one of the two guys plays poorly, or Georgia loses some games. But as long as Georgia's winning and both guys are playing well, everybody's happy. You don't go from competition to controversy until either one of the two quarterbacks falters, or until Georgia starts losing games. And at that point in time, fans start asking questions about, well, why is Georgia losing this game? It's because the wrong guy's playing quarterback. And by the way, you can see this happen in both regards. A lot of Georgia fans will make reference to back in 2002 when David Green and DJ Shockley were both splitting time. It's Shockley who is the backup who comes in and throws the pick against Florida, and some Georgia fans were saying, well, he shouldn't have been playing at all because he threw a pick and Georgia lost that game. So it's not just the starter who has a tendency to sort of fall in these side-by-side comparisons, these quarterback situations, but as long as both guys are playing well, the team is winning, then any quarterback scenario makes sense.
I agree with you. I think there's a ton of ifs in that scenario. I mean, you're talking about, Georgia definitely going undefeated this year, which I don't know if a lot of people feel that way. I think you also have to realize that when it comes to alpha males, and when it comes to quarterbacks, and when it comes to highly sought-after prospects like these guys are, you're going to have to side with one at one point if you're a Kirby Smart, and it's not about who gets reps and who's in the second quarter and who's in on third down. When you get to the 2-minute drill and you're tied at the end of the game, you have to, if you're Kirby Smart, you have to look at one of those quarterbacks and say, this guy gives us the best chance to win. And that scenario will come up at some point in the next year for Georgia.
Yeah, Cliff Nelson says on YouTube, he says, don't worry, Field starts at halftime of the LSU game when Jake Fromm gets knocked out or intercepted 3 times, LOL. You can always leave it to Cliff to sort of bring it back to where it needs to be with, a lot of these fan bases sort of bragging on their own school there. And, you said eventually it's going to be bad news for one of these two quarterbacks. You know what? The SEC is a big league. You come to the SEC, everybody's got championship dreams and everybody's got NFL dreams. Yeah. But it doesn't work out perfectly for everybody. Someone's going to get their feelings hurt probably eventually, but that's sort of true no matter what the scenario is.
Yeah.
At Georgia, another school, I mean, it's not going to work out for somebody the way they want it to.
I agree, and I think I think Kirby Smart is well positioned to deal with a situation like this. I think that right now you look at it and boy, it's an embarrassment of riches. I mean, it really is. But when you look at how last season played out for Georgia, and you look at some of the other things around the SEC, at some point this will be addressed. And I'm not ready to speak for Georgia, and I definitely won't speak for Georgia fans, but it will become a bigger and bigger topic the more playing time Justin Fields sees.
Yeah, absolutely. Vowel Slave, I believe is what we're going with over here on YouTube, says, I love the SEC. There just aren't really any easy games. That's on YouTube. And, there is part of that that's true that, a show like what we're doing right now, there are so many interesting storylines for so many of these SEC teams, and they find some way to take a new twist, new turn every single day. Not only do they make for compelling games during the fall, but the offseason build-up to these games, I just find it so fascinating.
I do too, and it's all about matchups too, isn't it? Like, that's one of my favorite parts about really breaking down a lot of these SEC games. It's a lot about matchups. Like, different teams are attacking you in different ways, and you always think, well, my team's really beefy up front. Well, that offensive line, they're going to crush people. There's no way anybody's going to jump in front of them. Well, then you go up against a team that's going to go around that. You go against a team with a ton of speed. You go up against a team that's running the spread. You get attacked differently on a weekly basis from every SEC team. Doesn't matter who you're playing. They're attacking you in a different way, and they're learning whatever worked against you the week before.
Christopher P. Shooter Smith says, I need a drink now after all this, talking about me. My only, I guess, point about this is it's almost like for some fans, this becomes like the dog chasing the car of, well, what do you do when you catch it? I mean, trust me, I do Dog Nation daily every single day, and for months and months and months, we talked on that show about, Georgia trying to chase down five-star quarterback Justin Fields. It's a big deal to Georgia fans. And it's almost like you hear from some Georgia fans now who are like sort of scared of, what do we do? Now we got Fromm and Fields. It's not time to be scared.
It's not a bad thing.
This is a time to celebrate the fact that Georgia's got what looks to be on paper pretty good prospects here. I'm going to keep saying this over and over again. It's never a bad thing to have good players.
Yeah, no, it's never a bad thing to have a good backup quarterback, right? I mean, especially if you have championship aspirations. Ask some of the other people from some of the other schools, and you can ask in these message boards. Ole Miss fans, how happy were they? They had Shea Patterson when, what's his name went down a couple of years ago. How happy were they had Jordan Ta'amu this past season when Shea Patterson went down? These things happen, and there is a more than good chance that this thing plays itself out down at Georgia. I think it's just, it's kind of in our DNA on the show to kind of guess, what happens if it doesn't.
Brandon Walker, our buddy on Facebook, says, how many two quarterbacks, by the way, for those of you who don't know, Brandon does our Mississippi State podcast on SEC Country every day and has been doing a great job, kind of the official Twitter or Facebook responder on our SEC Country Live Facebook feed. He says, how many two quarterback systems can you remember where everything stayed happy? But here's what I told you on Dog Nation Daily this morning when you were good enough to join me. I don't care what you think. I just care what you do. And I feel that way about everybody in life, not just quarterbacks, but the people that I work with. I don't care about your private life. I don't care about your private thoughts. Do you come to work ready to work? Do you come to work ready to contribute to the team? Do you come to work ready to sort of have your game face on? The quarterback's the same way. Fromm and Fields privately may hate each other. They may be jealous of each other. They may be looking at ways to sort of undermine each other. But as long as that doesn't become public and as long as they sort of go through the motions to be a good teammate, like Jalen Hurts did at Alabama in January, like Jacob Eason did at Georgia all last fall, as long as you go through the motions of doing what you have to do, I don't care what you think.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that you just have to be careful that you're not holding your breath and waiting for it to become a distraction. I think that's what the downside of this is. I don't care what you think until you are pouting, until you are sitting on the bench like Jared Garantano was in week 1 last year, until this comes to a head, and then all of a sudden everybody's got a microphone in your face or you're transferring. We've seen this thing play out. It hasn't been at Georgia, it hasn't been at Alabama, but we've seen it play out at other schools. I think it's I don't care what you think. I only care about what you do until that guy seems to speak his mind and wants to leave school.
Bo Molinari, a Texas A&M fan, says about the idea that things can change quickly. He says, I thought Kyle Allen was going to be a great starter, and then all of a sudden you got Kenny Hill coming in and Trevor Knight coming in. I mean, in the SEC, things have a way of changing really quickly. All right, let's do item number 4 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list, and we'll talk about the Florida Gators. I'm going to be very honest with you for a second. When I saw this headline and sort of dove into the story, I was expecting something very different than what I got. I was definitely expecting a mother talking about her son's performance at quarterback this spring of, is this going to be a cringe moment where we're a little bit worried about what the mom says publicly? Is this going to be the version of Jalen Hurts' dad from the other day of sort of going rogue here? I got to tell you, I was very impressed with the public face that Trina Jones, the mother of Emory Jones, put on her son's first spring at Florida when she talked to Zach Alberverdi from SEC Country. Now, there are a lot of quotes that Zach got. You should read the whole story, especially if you're a Florida fan. Let me give you one quote in particular that I think shows a pretty cool side of Trina Jones here that sets her up to really be able to help Emory in the future. Obviously, he was the prize recruit for Florida in the class of 2018. About how it worked for Emory this spring, where he really exits spring with, I would say right now, very little chance of being the starting quarterback. Trina says, I trust that Coach Mullen's going to do what's in Emory's best interest. I don't think Coach Mullen was going to put Emory in a position where it became too overwhelming for him. And Zach explains that she means in the spring game on that regard. Zach goes on to quote Trina Jones as saying, he, meaning Emory Jones, did just enough to give him an opportunity and expose him to a big crowd, and Florida did have one for the spring game. She goes on to say, so going into it slow is not a bad thing. If he's not the starting quarterback when fall comes, he's going to work hard and compete regardless. Boy, if every mama supported her son the way that she supports Emory Jones right there and has such a realistic viewpoint of what the future is like for Emory Jones, you know how much happier the average college football player would be? You don't hear a lot of sort of like psycho sports mom in that, a lot of stage mom. You hear nothing but sort of level-headed pragmatism. I am very impressed with Jones' mom and her description of the situation for Emory Jones at Florida. I think that sets him up to be more successful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I've seen these locker rooms where these parents are a little bit overbearing, and it's, you know, the parent wants to come in, and here's what the parent wants to do. I want to ask Coach why you're not playing. And this happens at all level of football. I want to ask Coach why you're not playing. In the NFL, it's the agent, though, right? The agent wants to know why you're not playing. But it's the parents.
College basketball, it's the agents, too.
Yeah, right. The AAU coach, right?
Right.
He wants to come up and see why you're not playing. Guess what? That kid knows why he's not playing, right? That kid knows why he's not playing. Nick Saban says it all the time. If you want to have that conversation, come in. I'll shut the door and I'll show you the film. And this kid can answer why he's not playing.
Yeah.
You don't need that extra stress on your shoulders. You're already stressed enough about your own playing time. You don't need your parents asking questions too. Why is my kid not playing? His mom knows that he needs extra work. He knows that he needs extra work. Dan Mullen knows he needs extra work. So you don't throw him to the fire in the spring game. You build it up. And it's like we've said all along ever since he was being recruited. This is not a polished product. It's going to be up to Dan Mullen to get him polished up to where he can really be a good member of this team for his career.
We, our buddy Brandon put the link to the full Emory Jones story up in our Facebook comment section here on SECcountry.com. And you know the status here. You know, Dan Mullen was the tutor of quarterbacks. That's what his pedigree was. Worked with Nick Fitzgerald at Mississippi State, worked with Dak Prescott before that, going back to Florida. He worked with Tim Tebow. He was brought to Florida to bring Florida a quarterback. And right now, I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you, it doesn't currently look like Florida has one, which puts more pressure on the future of Emory Jones, who is really, I think, along with Damian Pierce and a couple others, that centerpiece recruit for Florida's 2018 class. It'd be very easy to have a misstep here where Florida tries to put too much on Jones too soon, or there's too much of expectation from Jones' camp that, hey, I'm the guy. Y'all need me bad. You're begging me to come here. Yep. The fact that his mom here is saying all the right things, because, listen, parents in general are not media savvy. They're not trained, quote givers. You have a tendency that when you speak to a parent to have it sort of go awry here. But if you're Dan Mullen, you couldn't have written a quote for Emory Jones' mom any better than the one that she gave.
I don't think you could either. And I think that, I think everybody spent so much time claiming Dan Mullen is his quarterback guru, and I still believe he is. I still believe he's shown that enough times where he knows how to work his way around quarterbacks. That I look at it and I'm saying, you know what, this is not him benching Emory Jones or saying Emory Jones isn't ready. To me, that's a chapter of Dan Mullen's book, right? If we expect him to be a quarterback guru, expect him to know how to work with quarterbacks and to get them to their potential, this is just chapter one, right? This is him saying, listen, I'm not gonna deflate this guy. I'm gonna work with him over the summer behind closed doors until I'm ready to present him to everybody.
A couple more comments. Quentin Flanders says, sounds like a very intelligent, understanding woman. If he is the starter come fall, he would have earned it. Cameron Ferguson says, Dan Mullen, as far as I'm concerned, is the best quarterback guru in the SEC, maybe the country. His resume says a lot about what he can do as far as building quarterbacks up and mold them into a great player. I would argue in that regard, though, you can only sort of build up what you have to work with. And I think based on the previous regime at Florida, and listen, Doug Nussmeier and Jim McElwain were also thought of as quarterback tutors here. Right now, those raw materials for Mullen just might not quite be there. Emory Jones may be that eventually, but it sounds like based on the events of spring that he's just kind of a ways away from being that guy.
Yeah, and it fits in perfectly with everything we kind of thought was going to happen, right? He's not to the level of Justin Fields yet. This is part of the reason Dan Mullen got the job down at Florida, and for better or for worse, said, listen, I'm going to go in-house with Justin Fields on day number one and see if I can pry this guy away. It didn't work for him. He ends up obviously going to Georgia, and now you have Emory Jones. And so I think you're dealing with that in year one. But I still love the steps that Dan Mullen's been taking. I mean, I still really do. And listen, if Emory Jones never starts a game with Florida, then he goes by, 75% of the quarterbacks that get those SC scholarships, they flame out in one way or another. So he'll just go right along with that. But I don't know if that's what we're dealing with just yet. I'm not going to bury the kid just yet.
On YouTube, Morgan Recton's a Florida fan. He, I think, sums this up pretty well. He says, everybody's calling Mullen a quarterback whisperer, which I think he is. But then everyone, and by everyone I think he means Florida fans, hating on him because we don't have a stud in the first season. That's really tough. When you have that reputation of, this is a guy that, and the way it's phrased is always so tough. He took, Nick Fitzgerald, who I believe his only other offer was to UT Chattanooga, and he's made him into a competent SEC quarterback. Dak Prescott, I think, was a 3-star quarterback. He sort of like seemingly molded guys from nothing. I'm not quite sure that happens. I just know those are outliers. Most of the time, the good quarterbacks were good prospects. I mean, that's what most of the time it's going to be. It's almost like an unfair, the idea of being a quarterback whisperer, that he can sort of turn an average quarterback into a good one. That's a hard reputation to live up to.
It definitely is. And that's kind of what I was alluding to was, if we expect this guy to be a quarterback guru, a quarterback whisperer, then if he's got the handbook, I just think that right now Emory Jones is dealing with the first few pages, right? It doesn't have to be, within 3 months he can get Emory Jones on the field. That's not what makes you a good quarterback coach. He's the head coach at Florida right now, and he understands that in the end, the best is for Emory Jones to sit on the sideline right now.
One more YouTube comment, SEC Savage says, Dan Mullen is just in his first year. He deserves a break. Give him a recruiting cycle to get this type of player, to get his type of player in there. We'll see how it plays out. Let me do item number 5 here on our SEC Country Live first.
Gotta love strength coaches, don't you?
Are we just out of good ideas? Are we just out of good ideas? Now, let me explain this. It was a couple of weeks ago that we had the South Carolina strength coach walking around his brand new weight room, fired up about how good it was going to be.
Yeah, it was.
Can we show the South Carolina first here? This is what we showed you a couple of weeks ago about how excited the South Carolina strength coach is about their new weight room. Take a look at this.
Over 25,000 square foot weight room. Step foot in here, you bring your A game every day. Let go, right here.
You kind of get the point. That's enough of that. Although I do I like that guy though.
That's awesome.
So Tennessee got a new strength coach because they got to new everything, and they are getting a new weight room too. And I guess the only idea that exists is to put the high energy strength coach in the weight room and brag about how good it's going to be when it's all done. Here is Tennessee's version of the same dad-blasted video that South Carolina just shot.
Craig Fitzgerald here, totally excited today. About to show you our new strength conditioning facility for football. It's groundbreaking.
Look at the intensity of those eyebrows.
We're going to do the best facility
that left eyebrow is
been.
stuck in an
right now,
open
as you're looking in
position.
here,
I mean,
that
thing has been stitched to his forehead. That thing is
exactly what we need.
absolutely stuck right there.
All right, you got to listen to this. Listen to this.
Wall, right against that wall right there. Used to be mirrors. We don't need our guys looking at themselves. We need them training.
No
our
mirrors.
rack's gonna run
Getting
right
rid of the
down
mirrors.
Yeah.
We're not going to look at ourselves
Right.
anymore.
With
It's the
platforms
same video.
laid
Now, I love the part where he explains about like they're getting rid of the old floor and they're
Run,
putting in the
jump,
new floor because the new
sprint.
floor is going to be better.
Walk
Exactly what
in.
they
Yeah,
need.
right.
The old floor, that's not for winning the SEC championships. The new floor, that's perfect. Come on, can we get a little more creative with some of this stuff?
Hey, the fact of the matter is that the new floor is not going to be any different than the old floor. The weights are weights, right? Medicine balls are medicine balls. Mirrors are mirrors. They're going to be in weight rooms. The fact of the matter is that they need a place that can show off the recruits, right? That's all it is. You have to have the strength coach that has the horse throat. And this guy's been around the SEC. I think South Carolina fans remember him in South Carolina. I remember him coaching some of my friends when he was with the Houston Texans.
Oh, this guy right here?
Yeah, this guy's been a head strength coach of the Houston Texans. He's been at South Carolina.
I will say he's either great at his job or like he's a lot less high energy than the South Carolina dude.
Right, yo.
And Scott Cochran makes him look like a librarian. I mean,
he's
compared
got
to
that
Scott
horse
Cochran,
throat, but yeah, he's very toned down. And I kind of I think that goes along with really what everything else we've seen from Tennessee's coaching staff so far, right? I mean, we've seen toned down from almost everybody we've shown on video.
He sort of reminds you of like the state patrol officer that pulls you over. Sir, what I'm gonna need for you to do right now, sir, is step out of the car.
Yeah,
Sir. There's
yeah.
a lot of that cadence the way that he talks.
He's got this eyebrow going up. We're going to put the med balls over here. No mirrors. They're all the same. And I'm telling y'all, strength coaches, when they get to that level, are all the same.
Over on YouTube, Morgan Recton says, is it a thing that all strength and conditioning coaches, you actually talked about this, have to have that loud, scratchy voice? In that case, I think Coach O's the wrong job. There is something about Coach O that would be like a great strength coach. Now, he's probably working on
chest, just
a little more like, yeah, it's more of like, he's got a little extra body fat than you want the strength coach to have. He's a little more of that barrel-chested guy. He's sort of like the old man strong version of a strength coach.
Yeah, he's an old school strength coach for sure.
But he would be good in that role.
No, there's no doubt about it. And listen, there's different roles, and I swear if I could show y'all this, y'all would laugh so hard. There's just different roles. Like you look at a guy in the weight room and you listen to him talk, you know exactly what his job is in the weight room, right? Like that guy is taking all the weights down before practice. Like the soft-spoken guy, hey, can you come over here and let me get your weight? Everybody has a role to it.
James Crump says it's probably a 3-star weight room, obviously referencing the level of recruit that Tennessee's brought in lately. And, you know, we're going to talk tomorrow, it's draft day tomorrow, about Tennessee kind of bragging on, you know, all the guys that Jeremy Pruitt's coached at other schools. Here's what concerns me if I'm Tennessee. And this video is a perfect example of this. Everything you're selling, somebody else is trying to sell and has been selling it longer than you. You know, it's like, it's the Saban disciple head coach. Well, Kirby Smart's been at Georgia for 2016. It's the new weight room. Well, it looks like you're just renovating yours, whereas South Carolina's building one from scratch. I mean this in all sincerity. What is Tennessee selling that no one else is either selling better or has been selling longer? What is your, to use a business term here, your unique value proposition?
Yeah.
What's different about Tennessee? Because it ain't that video. That video got published by South Carolina 3 weeks before you did.
Yeah, no, let me try to answer that for you, though, because I'm going to take Tennessee's side on this because I feel like they're doing it their own way. First of all, you have to get upgraded to where you're at least on par with everybody else, right? Tennessee's not, they're not getting enough money from donors right now where you can say, boy, we're going to shoot out in front of everybody and get the lazy river and the putt-putt course. But I think what you're selling is Jeremy Pruitt. You're selling a guy in Jeremy Pruitt who can make those relationships, and he's proven that. He's, you know, J.J. Peterson was a guy. You had guys all over the country that said, I'm at least going to take a visit there because Jeremy Pruitt is a guy I can chop it up with. That's their selling point right now until he gets the wins back on the field.
By the way, Kevin Zeminski in the Facebook comment section says, B.A., that'd be a good job for you. I may have the energy to do it. I don't quite have the physique of a strength and conditioning coach. What I would love to see, though, maybe one day we'll try to do this. What if one of these strength coaches like just got introduced to me? Like, how long do you think it'd take one of these guys to get my life turned around? Like, you think they'd have me like, you know, spitting fire here before it's all said and done?
Let me send you a packet in the mail. Let me start you off from scratch. Let me build you up. Let me get this thing going.
Talk to your boy Scotty Cochran, see if he'll help get me in shape.
You want me to send he'll send you like a 3-day packet.
Now he can't be like real mean to me and stuff, but you know, like he can't be shouting at me.
Are you down for the before and after picks?
I'm more of a
before and after pics, you know, that you got to send in.
I'm not going shirtless.
Before and after pics, where like the Florida pictures, where the lights up here and the after pic.
Yeah, exactly. You get like that little start lighting.
You got the start
show
light,
off the cut up physique. All right, maybe we'll do that this summer. Yeah. Item number 6 in our SEC Country Live 1st and 10. Speaking of Alabama, we talked about Scotty Cochran there a moment ago. They're also talking about quarterbacks, and another clue that maybe Jalen Hurts may be on his way out the door is there is a lot of hype going Mac Jones' way. All of a sudden, he's the flavor of the month. Now that he looked pretty good on A-Day, there's no denying that. Damian Harris, one of the great Alabama running backs. In fact, after the A-Day game on Saturday, really gave a pretty strong endorsement of Mac Jones deserving some consideration to maybe even be the Alabama starter. Here's what the very good running back Harris said about what we for now think of as the number 3 quarterback, Mac Jones.
No disrespect to anybody, but a lot of the talk has been about Jalen and Tua, and you know, one thing that me and him have talked about personally is, you know, every day just go to work, and you'll have the results that you want if you keep working hard, keep pushing, and just focus on controlling what you can control. And so I think he went out there and proved today that he can play. And he's a guy whose name should be talked about with, you know, our first two quarterbacks. So hopefully he'll start getting the recognition that he deserves.
So you're an Alabama guy. You're a fair person to ask this question to. How excited are you about Mac Jones?
I don't know. Excited is not the word, right? Excited is a little bit overstepping the boundary. I think comfortable might be a better word for me right now, right? I've grown with some comfortability that if Mac Jones has to see time on the field next year, that it's not going to be like, you're just going to get run over. I think that he showed that, listen, the arm strength's probably not where you want it to be yet. The progression's probably not where you want it to be just yet. But I don't think he was overwhelmed by the moment in the spring game where he knew a ton of people were watching him. I mean, he was the backup quarterback in the spring game. He showed the ability to really mentally cope with that. And I think that gives me a small level of comfortability moving forward if he does have to take actual good snaps.
I mean, I think that the thing that's undeniable here is that Jones himself, it speaks to the depth of Alabama's recruiting power. He was himself a one-time SEC committed. He was committed to Kentucky and ended up breaking that commitment to go to Alabama instead. That shows you the depth that Alabama has here. This is a guy that we haven't even really considered at all. Now, I still think a guy like this as your backup is a pretty big step, below what Jalen Hurts would potentially be for you. But I mean, he's got a pretty strong pedigree. Bowl School is a big-time program from down in the Jacksonville area. SEC scholarship offers before he chose Alabama. I mean, this is a guy that does have some credentials.
Yeah, no, And I think that's fair to say, and that's why I say I'm not excited. Like Mac Jones, I'm not overly excited about Mac Jones, but it's a comfortability. Listen, all of a sudden, if Jalen were to leave and Tua rolls an ankle in the fourth quarter of a game, I'm not going to say, oh my God, like what is going to happen now? Mac Jones is going to come in. You're probably going to run the ball a little bit more. He's going to be able to run the offense to a certain extent, and you're going to feel comfortable with what they have moving forward.
So apparently, in the Facebook comment section, let me see if I can find this. I guess one of our Facebook commenters is a teacher. Oh, it's Enrique Murillo. Here's what he says. He says, "What's up, SEC country? Sorry I'm late. Been busy knocking out final grades and having students give me presentations." He says, "Go Dogs" there as well. So he's having to try to get some of those final grades in, and some of the commenters like, "Hey, just give everybody a C and move on."
Yeah. Listen, my mom's a teacher. I mean, she deals with all that stuff right at the end of the year. Just like, let me just get out of here.
So, Enrique, I'm glad to have you checking in on the program. Glad you got done with those presentations and grading those papers. We're glad you're here. SEC Savage also on YouTube says, "Here's the thing. Mac Jones showed progression after 1 year, and Jalen Hurts didn't after 2 years." I mean, Nick Saban himself was caught on camera essentially saying that same thing, is that for the people who've watched Mac Jones closely, apparently they have seen some growth in him.
Yeah, he's added bulk to his frame and his core, BA. He's added some bulk.
Yeah, I learned yesterday what core muscles are.
I learned yesterday what core muscles are.
Which gives you an idea of how tough Scotty Cochran's work with me is going to be. He's going to have to explain to me what these muscle groups are.
Yeah, it's not the groin.
It's not pronounced groin, it's pronounced groin.
Yeah.
And it's your core muscle, which is nowhere near your groin.
And I don't think he's done growing by any means. I mean, Mac Jones, I think, is going to be, turn out to be a very serviceable backup. I don't know that you ever want him going into the season as QB1, but like I said, I think he has definitely shown some progression.
Let's do item number 7 here on our SEC Country Line First and 10 list. Let's talk some LSU Tigers, and we've obviously got the NFL draft coming up tomorrow. I mentioned that it starts tomorrow anyway. It goes really throughout the rest of the weekend, and Ross Dellinger does a great job covering the LSU Tigers. For the Baton Rouge Advocate, mentioned the other day that since 2013, no school in college football has had more early entrants into the NFL draft than LSU.
Yeah.
Now, for me, this speaks to the recruiting power that LSU was for quite some time, that guys just have left early. It seems like at the end of the Les Miles era, they were hurt by that especially bad, had a hard time replacing those guys. But for the most part, juniors going to the NFL or third-year players going to the NFL is about having a talented roster, and it's not really necessarily some sort of negative. But at SEC Country, Nick Suss was saying, well, if that has been true for LSU, if guys have left this program early in large numbers, who are some potential candidates to do that in 2019 after the 2018 season is done? I thought he had a kind of an interesting list on this. We're going to agree with most of these. Devin White, obviously the linebacker, stands to be maybe the top player in the SEC this season. Greedy Williams, among the best defensive backs. Obviously, Rashard Lawrence, maybe, as Nick said, maybe a little bit more of a long shot on this. And then it's the 2 Texas Tech transfers, Braden Fehoko and Jonathan Giles. What do you make of that list there from a Nick Suss at SEC Country?
I got to tell you, man, and LSU fans aren't going to be happy with me. I think at least 4 of the 5 are gone.
That's tough.
I think 4 of the 5 are gone. I think Devin White is definitely gone. I think he's too good to kind of keep in that loop. I think Greedy Williams, when you talk about corners, those can be not complete products, and they're still gone because they are just extremely hard to find. I think Rashard Lawrence, from what he's shown so far, I think that he has a good chance of going. Braden Fehoko seems like he's lighting the world on fire. Those D linemen that come around like that are just hard to find. Now, I don't know Jonathan Giles' measurables. I don't know if he's going to have them to where you really jump out and say first-round talent, got to go. But I think 4 of the 5 is easily attainable if you look at those 5 guys.
We had a comment on our YouTube comment section earlier today, and I'm sorry, I don't remember who said it, but it was such an important point, I thought. It just didn't fit with what we were talking about at the time. But it was an LSU fan talking about how crucial the 2019 recruiting cycle is going to be for Ed Orgeron. And what you just described, I think, is one of the reasons why that is so true. If you're losing these transfer players that you brought in, if you're losing, leaders of the defense like Devin White and Greedy Williams, man, you got to replace that with some guys in 2019. And there's already, C. Wilm 236 in the comment section was describing me as being an LSU hater a moment ago. Some of y'all say that, but I'm really not. I think I'm speaking the truth, though, when I say that one of the things that Orgeron's not doing right now is he's not recruiting up to LSU standards, and that's got to change in 2019. There were way too many kids from Louisiana at Alabama spring game on Saturday. If you want me to just be just gut level, honest and real, what are all these kids from the 504 doing? And you like the little lingo. What are all these Louisiana kids doing at Alabama for spring game? That's a bad sign for Ed Orgeron. You got to get better.
It's a little bit of a head turning situation. It really is, and we brought that up because I don't think it's so much about Ed Orgeron and the product you put on the field this year, because it's like I said, LSU is going to have the talent. They're going to have defensive players that really can get the job done a ton. But how far do you go down this road where every year, and I brought this up, and you guys can attest to it, on signing day, I said I didn't think LSU had a good day. They signed some good players, but when the people exiting your program are way, way better than the people that are coming into your program, then I think you've got an issue. Because how many signing days in a row are you willing to go down that road if you're not getting it back up to standard? I think Ed Orgeron, I'm not ready to bury the guy yet, but he's got a ton of work left to do this year if he's going to get back up to that standard.
Let's do item number 8 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. One of the things that I think that Tennessee's been doing that's been kind of good here is highlighting some of those practice videos from some of their on-field coaches to give you a chance to kind of get to know more of these guys. A lot of these names are well known to SEC fans because they've worked at other SEC schools, but in terms of reframing them as Tennessee guys, I think a lot of these videos really work. Here is one that Tennessee produced about their defensive line coach, Chris Rump, and there's some stuff here at the beginning of this that I think has a way of really working with the next generation of recruits. Here is the spotlight Tennessee put on defensive line coach Chris Rump.
Man, this is my personal ministry. I smell them quarterbacks today. To empower young men. I'm scaring you that much? You can't even concentrate? So they can become better men, better husbands, better fathers, better citizens. Get the flats, get the flats. He just told you gotta process it. I like to say I'm a player's coach. You know, as a player, there are some coaches in your life that was effective, so you take the good things away from them, and I try to put all that together with my personality and who I am, and voila.
I want you to anyway, you kind of get the point here of this, and I'm not trying to be, like too corny here, but you think about, like, I have kids. I doubt they'll ever get a scholarship offer from Tennessee, but I do have a son, and I think about if he was about to go off and live somewhere else. As a parent, I'm sure your parents felt the same way when you went to Alabama. You left Pensacola to go to Alabama. You want to believe they're going to be in good hands when they get there. Yeah. He's talking about personal ministry and making these guys, good young men. Boy, that stuff's got to play well with moms. That stuff's got to play so. And Rob's kind of known as a pretty good recruiter, but that stuff's got to play so well. Like, that video does a pretty good job of sort of casting him as players coach. I'm going to be your father figure when you get on this campus. That's got to work.
I'm just laughing so hard thinking back to, but when that kid gets on the campus.
Oh, it's totally different.
Oh, my God. Like, the kid gets on the campus and he goes into Chris Rump's office and he's like, hey, coach, good to see you. What you doing in here? What you doing? Why aren't you in class? Just like the complete whole dynamic.
But hold on, but every coaching staff, even the on-field coaches, you got to have the good guy coach, right? Is Rump not the good guy coach for Tennessee?
Well, I think
you got to have somebody that's on your side.
I think you want a guy that can do both, right? I think you want a guy that can say, "Listen, this is what I am in front of mom. I'm going to sit down and eat a nice dinner with you. I'm going to tell you about the ministry on the field. I'm going to tell you about how I turn these guys into men." And then when you do get on the field, you have to turn it up to the next level as a coach and say, "I smell quarterbacks today. Did you hear him?" I mean, like, I think that's in the handbook for every defensive line coach.
Yeah.
So when you look at Chris Rump's past, I mean, this guy's, he's Clemson, Texas, Alabama, Florida. I mean, he's been around. He's seen it. He knows that you have to be able to do a little bit of both and massage it in both directions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of those hires. Most of what, once again, this is all kind of goes back to that tough sell thing. A lot of the guys that Pruitt hired are sort of repackaged guys from other SEC schools. But in Rump's case, I think that's a pretty good addition when you sort of bring those guys in there.
Yeah, and it's like I said, he used to be at Bama, and I was very happy with what I heard about him at Bama. I think he had 6, maybe 7 players drafted on his defensive lines back in those years. I think he was there for 3 years, and he always turned out a good product.
All right, let's do item number 9 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. South Carolina announcing news. A couple players leaving the program. Defensive back Antoine Wilder, defensive tackle Aaron Thompson, both on their way out of the South Carolina program. Neither of these guys, now one of the guys had started some, but neither of these guys major contributors. The South Carolina roster is getting better. There's not going to be room for everybody. This is the sort of shrapnel you expect to see, is it not?
I'm so glad you said it that way. The South Carolina roster, I feel like, is getting better. And you do see both these guys really scratching and clawing for playing time, but neither one of them became huge contributors. Yeah. I think for that reason, you look at it and say, boy, if those two guys are headed out, there's walk-ons, there's grad transfers, there's a lot of other people's, and we talk about it all the time. Roster management is so important. This is just Will Muschamp, I think, in a couple of different ways saying, listen, we've got to get better.
And sometimes it doesn't mean these guys aren't good players.
Exactly.
It's just a bad fit at South Carolina because of what Muschamp and those guys are looking for. I hope they find new homes.
Yeah, I definitely do too. Antoine Wilder's right here from Atlanta. I think
great name.
I think Antoine Wilder. I think the other guys from South Florida. So I have no doubt that from those two areas, those guys will find a home to play for.
All right, let's do item number 10 here. Former Mississippi State star Fletcher Cox, also part of the Philadelphia Eagles. in their Super Bowl run. Well, his hometown has kind of honored him in celebration of that. For item number 10, let me show you here, according to Zach Berman, reporting for Philly.com, that River Road in Yazoo City, Mississippi, is now Fletcher Cox Road, named after him, after Cox, a part of the Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl championship. How much would you love to have something named after you?
Oh my God, it's awesome. And honestly, Fletcher Cox definitely deserves it. I'm telling you right now. When this guy was a rookie, we used to turn on his film and be like, oh my God, who is that? That guy is something else. And he was a first-round draft pick out of Mississippi State. So Yazoo City, I mean, I'm guessing he's one of the bigger things to ever come out of there. He definitely deserves a name.
See, I feel like you, former player, it's a little easier for you. A little harder for like sort of a, blowhard.
To get like a street named after you?
Yeah, like,
oh, listen.
I'm going to have to give some pretty hot takes on the internet to get a street named after me. That's going to be a hard thing to pull off.
It might seem that way as a player, but listen, Emmitt Smith, Roy Jones Jr. from Pensacola, that ship has sailed. Neither one of them have a street named after him, so I'm way down the list.
Mike Johnson Avenue, can't get that?
There probably is a Mike Johnson Avenue somewhere. It's just not named after me. Yeah. Just not named after this one.
All right, anyway, we like to close the show the same way every day. We're always looking for champions of life. And today, this is like a sponsored video, but it's incredibly well done. I think this is incredibly funny. It doesn't involve the SEC, but it does involve football. Jared Goff has really made quite a name for himself as of late. The LA Rams are going to be among the favorites in the NFC for 2018. And Goff, as a part of a promotional video with Red Bull, the energy drink, goes on to a campus in California of a junior college and sort of puts this costume on and pretends to be a junior college quarterback who just arrived. This is a really funny video. The whole thing's like 6 minutes long. Let me show you a little bit of Jared Goff here, sort of surprising some of the JUCO kids with the kid they know nothing about who turns out can actually play a little bit. Take a look at this.
I am Dre Fogue, and I am the transfer. Excited to try to surprise these kids and give them a little prank. And
yeah, I know as much as you.
At the same time, kind of nervous.
What's up, Dre? How are you? How are
Good to
you?
meet you.
Good to see you. Want to get a little stadium in, get loose?
You want me to run a little bit?
Yeah, why don't you run it, and then I'll meet you right over at those steps when you get done.
There's a new guy coming in. I'm not really sure how I feel about it, but hopefully I can just compete.
I want him in.
You want me
Let's
right
get
now?
Dre in there right now.
You know what you're doing here? Yeah, I think I got it.
All right, so anyway, you kind of get the gist here. He starts throwing the football, and he's obviously an NFL caliber quarterback. The funniest part of the video, and it's sort of hard to show all these reactions, are how just depressed the other quarterbacks are when they got one more guy coming in trying to compete with them for a Division I scholarship. The transactional nature of this relationship they have with this team, it's a hilarious video. And Jared Goff's actually pretty funny in it, too.
No, yeah, I know. I love when Red Bull does these videos.
Do they do a lot of these?
They've done a couple of these across sports. Like, they've done a couple with the Chicago Cubs. They had Greg Maddux come in and throw batting practice to Chris Bryant. It was like, who's this guy throwing, like, sinkers and sliders and all that.
All right.
They do a good job with them. I love every time they put one out.
Oh, that's really good stuff. So really funny. I didn't realize this had been something they'd done a lot of, but I enjoyed that one. Check out the podcast of our show. It'll be up immediately after the show. If you want to listen to the audio version of the program, you can also share the show with your friends. It's a huge help to us. Facebook, Twitter. I guess we didn't check the Twitter feed today. We need to make sure we do that tomorrow.
Sorry, if you're on Twitter,
Facebook, YouTube. We will hit all those and keep taking your comments. But share the show. Let your friends know we're talking about the SEC here every afternoon. Fun to have you on our program today. We'll see you back here again tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for another episode of SEC Country Live. Y'all have a great day.